Hi, my name is Jenny, and I'm here to teach you statistics. So, statistics is the science of collecting, organizing, summarizing, and analyzing information to draw conclusions to answers. When would you use statistics? You would use statistics when wanting a percentage or a number that represents the effectiveness of a variable and the result. And the information that you do gather is called a data. Data can be categorized in two different category types. Categorical, which is qualitative. It has different values of the nominal value, which is organized by name, label, or just categorized. So, for instance, just on a name basis, Stephen, Molly, and Greg, they're just names. There's no inflection into a rank or anything, no system of organization. They're just a name, a label, a person. The ordinal level, still under qualitative, is the values that have properties of the nominal level, but however their names do have a ranking system. For instance, first, second, third place, there's an inflection of the word which gives a rank to it. President, vice president, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, general. Those are different rankings of a word that gives it a meaningful place or a value to it. On the other side of collecting data, there's the numerical or the quantitative side. There's discrete, which has a finite number of possible values or countable numbers of possible values. Continuous, that has infinite number of possible values that are not countable. Other different types of numerical data, interval level, and has properties of the ordinal. The difference in values of the variables have meaning. A 0 in this interval level does have a meaning. For example, saying how many ounces of coffee is there left. 0 can be a countable number, whereas in the ratio level, it has properties of the interval level, having numbers, but the ratio of values of the variable has meaning. 0 is the absence of quantity. So, in the essence of temperature, 0 is the absence of a degree of temperature, a degree of heat. SAT scores would also be the same. There are different types of collecting data. There's observational study, where you would observe the individuals without trying to influence the outcome of the responses given, just by watching their behavior. Or experimental study assigns individuals to a certain group and intentionally changes the values of the experiment and records a new response. So that's when you would have a placebo group or a control group and trying to find which drug would have the most effect, the fake one or the actual drug. Question is, who does one sample? When sampling a population, you can't sample like the whole entire world, 6 billion people. So usually we take a portion of those people, which we would say would represent a demographic of people that you would want to study. This is called a population. It's a smaller size, usually about 400 would be a good number to have. It's a good ratio number that you can use for statistical percentages. Within a population that you would be asking a certain question to would be within the population. They would have special characteristics of a smaller group, and that's called your sample group. So in your population, you might only be looking for males, and then in the sample group, you're only looking for males of a certain age. And even more specified is the individual group, where within the sample group, within the population, would be the individual of a male of a certain age with a certain color hair that you're looking for, and that's the person that you would end up asking your questions to, so you can make a statistic from it. So here we're going to go over an example of a statistic, and it says Barney claims that an 83% correlation between the time men wear boutonnieres and the times that they get laid. Times you would wear it: proms, weddings, or grandma's funerals. This is from How I Met Your Mother in 2010. So we're going to use Barney's boutonniere statistics, and we want to see what kind of people he would be asking for this question. So Barney's demographic would be in the population of the greater whole of people. He would ask men who got laid. he wants to be more specific. He wants to make sure that it's the people who wore boutonnieres that he would be asking. So his sample group within that population of men who got laid would be men who wore boutonnieres. And so he could get a good percentage, he wanted to make sure that it was validated, his question. So the individual men or a man that he would ask would be men who wore a boutonniere attending a prom, a wedding, or a grandma's funeral. But there are problems that do arise with asking questions like this, because there is sometimes a bias that could happen, which is a human-generated choosing of either answering, not answering, giving false answers. It's a preference. People do it all the time. People choose what they want or don't want to be heard. So, in sometimes a bias, there's undercoverage, which the sample doesn't represent the population equally. So saying if Barney had only asked men who got laid that were 15 years old that went to prom, probably not all of them would have gotten laid at 15 years old at prom, wearing a boutonniere. The other part is, another example would be Barney asking men who got laid at grandma's funeral, which is probably highly unlikely because they would all be related, and that would just be really weird. Another type of bias would be a non-response bias, or no participation in the survey. Somebody you would try to ask their question, he would have fit perfectly into the questions that you wanted to ask. He was a man of a certain age for a certain reason, but didn't want to be a part of it. Can't count him part of your statistic. Or you could, and that would be the not sure, didn't answer, undecided portion. A response bias would be amending or withholding information. Somebody saying that, oh, he did get laid at prom, but he wasn't wearing a boutonniere. That could be a bias, because he didn't give you all the information that you actually needed. So there are different types of sampling that can occur, but also can occur with problems. Random sampling is a use of chance to select individuals from a population to be included in a sample. Usually that is the best way to choose people for statistics, randomly choosing them. Hopefully they fit into your perspective. Finding people who run around with boutonnieres on them is probably not the easiest. Convenience sampling, in which individuals are easily obtained and not based on randomness. There's also judgment sampling, where the researcher picks the sample or picks a person. So in that case, Barney could have just picked people at weddings or proms that were the jocks or really handsome guys or the best man, because that's like a thing. That would be a bias. That would be unfair to the actual statistic, where it would only be in favor of what the researcher is wanting to get across. There are other types of sampling methods. There's 3 of them: stratified, systemic, and cluster. So stratified, obtained by separating the population into non-overlapping groups and then obtaining a simple random sample from each. Systemic, obtained by selecting every so many individuals from the population and assigning them a random number, so you can ask them at random. A cluster, obtaining by selecting an individual within a randomly selected collection of group or individuals. These are actually good methods of sampling a population, which could give you a better diversity, but also probably really not incur a lot of bias. So in conclusion, we went over what data is, information gathering, data collections, types of ways to obtain your information by observing or experimenting by changing the variables. We went over what kind of sample there is, the population. Within that is a sample population, a targeted group, and the individual of the specific person you want to ask. There's types of sampling and also types of bias that we went by. For statistical purposes, I don't quite know that boutonniere ratios and percentages is high on most people's interest lists, but it could be good for statistical purposes if it would be an interesting reason why you would wear suits. Thank you for watching my presentation. At the very end of this, I took a photo of my participant who isn't here right now, but was here for the rehearsal when I made this PowerPoint. So here's the photo of him, and thank you for watching.